Hello, my name is Scott.
And I'm Martin, and today we're going to be talking about our chosen pest species, which is sea lice, and the impacts that they have on salmon and the aquaculture sector. To give you some background information, aquaculture is defined as the breeding, rearing, and harvesting of aquatic species. It is currently the fastest growing sector for food production. With the global population recently surpassing 8 billion people, the sector is required to keep up with food demands, and it is projected that by 2030 it will be responsible for producing 62% of the seafood that is used for human consumption. The sector also helps to repopulate wild fish species that are at risk of endangerment. Scott will now elaborate on the importance of the aquaculture sector.
Currently, the International Salmon Farmers Association estimated that global salmon production produced 15.4 billion US dollars over exporting 2.5 million tons of salmon around the world. They estimate that 17.5 billion nutritional meals with essential nutrients like proteins and omega 3s are provided annually. With massive growth in the industry since it started, aquaculture has provided roughly 130,000 jobs for people in countries where it's being carried out. And salmon aquaculture, if carried out properly, could provide an environmentally sustainable food source which promotes economic growth, food security, and rural area development.
So, alongside carp and tilapia, salmon are one of the most important fish in aquaculture. Salmon are anadromous. They spend the first 2 to 3 years of their life in freshwater streams before they migrate out to sea to feed, grow, and mature. Once they've matured, they return to freshwater to lay their spawn. The diet of the salmon consists of plankton, insects, and invertebrates in their juvenile stage, and as adults, they feed off capelin, which is a smaller fish. Currently, the Atlantic salmon is under threat from various factors such as overfishing, water pollution, and disease. In the past 25 years, wild salmon populations have decreased by 70% as a result of these factors. Another factor that impacts their survival is sea lice infestations. Sea lice latch onto the salmon and feed off their skin and blood, which erodes the epidermis and causes skin lesions, making the salmon more susceptible to diseases. Infestations of sea lice can also impact the behaviour and mobility of the salmon, which increases their chances of predation. If the sea lice cause extensive damage to the salmon, it will often lead to their death, which will lead to further depletions of wild salmon stocks. In aquaculture, if the salmon has been severely damaged, it will likely decrease their market value, which creates economic issues in the sector. I'll now pass you over to Scott to discuss the biology of sea lice.
Sea lice are ectoparasitic copepods in the family Caligidae, which are small crustaceans found in every aquatic environment. They are the major pest of Atlantic salmon aquaculture, and the particular species that parasitizes Atlantic salmon is Lepiopterus simonis. They're morphologically adapted to attach to and parasitize their host with the help of a suction cup like cephalothorax. Their second antennae also aid in attachment, and when mating, they will often attach to areas with the least hydrodynamic disturbances, such as behind the fins. They're a highly fecund organism and molt to adult stages fairly quickly given the correct conditions. In fact, maturity takes between 17 and 72 days, but it's dependent on ocean temperatures. They have a direct life cycle, meaning they transmit directly from one host to the next without the need for an intermediate life cycle stage or vector. Their life cycles outlined here on the diagram on screen. And on the left hand side, you'll see that eggs hatch into naupliar 1, which molt to a second naupliar stage. These naupliar stages are non feeding and rely on yolk reserves for energy before they molt to the copepoded stage, which is the infectious stage where it searches for an appropriate host. Once attached, sea lice continue developing through calamus stages, separated by molts where they're physically attached to the host. These pre-adult and the adult stages are mobile on the fish and may move between the other host fishes. Before adult female sea lice extrude a pair of egg strings which hold up to 500 to 1,000 eggs, and they might bear 6 to 11 strings in their lifetime. I'll now pass you on to Martin to talk about their ecology.
So, sea lice are ubiquitous in the marine environment, which makes them very difficult to manage. As they live on and feed off the salmon, the fish is considered to be their habitat. Sea lice favour water conditions where salinity is high, hence why salmon are likely to be infested in seawater as adults. When the salmon migrate back to freshwater to lay their spawn, the sea lice which are attached can survive in the freshwater for 2 to 3 weeks, but cannot produce offspring. Scott will now discuss the economic impacts caused by sea lice.
The sea lice has impacted salmon aquaculture economically, and it's projected to escalate as salmon farms become more common and have higher densities in sea cages. The combination of combating sea lice infestations and the cost of dealing with resulting mortalities costs around 12% of the annual revenue generated by global aquaculture. This was recorded as a loss of 7.1 billion US dollars between 2013 and 2019, according to Compassion in World Farming. To give a more local example, farmed salmon were worth £2 billion per year in Scotland, and in Scottish salmon aquaculture, 15% of salmon mortalities are attributed to sea lice and their treatment, which costs Scotland aquaculture around £300 million a year. There are regulations in place for the amount of salmon lice that are acceptable. It's 2 lice per salmon in Norway, which factors into the cost as infestations become more common and frequent with increased densities of salmon within cages. Now we're just going to talk about some of the control strategies that are used in controlling sea lice. There are industry-wide measures such as fallowing and strategic area management, but infestation control options for sea lice are a variety of medical and non-medical treatments. Pesticides are the most productive and predictable measure and can be applied as either a bath treatment or in feed. Pesticides used in bath treatments historically are organophosphates, pyrethroids and H2O2, and in feed treatments used are pharmaceuticals like emamectin benzoate or neem extract. Their extensive use has led to issues being developed with resistance, as doses much kill sea lice but not harm the salmon.
So, sea lice have shown to have a low tolerance to sudden increases and decreases in water temperature, and scientists have used this knowledge to create thermal treatments to remove sea lice. Thermalizers have shown to be effective in the removal of sea lice as they kill 75 to 100% of lice on infected salmon, and up to 80 tons of salmon can be passed through a thermalizer in an hour. Traditionally, lukewarm water is used in the thermalizer treatments. However, cold water can be used as a more cost-effective method as it saves on energy. However, cold water treatments can cause damage to the skin and eyes of the treated salmon, which may affect their quality. In the thermalizer, the fish enter the system where they are separated from the seawater, which is filtered back into the environment, which you can see here in stages 1, 2, and 3. In stages 4 to 6 here, the fish pass through the warm water in the treatment loop, and then they enter another separator, which filters out the treatment water before the fish is released, which can be seen in stages 7 and 8. Stages 9 and 10 show that the treatment water, which has been separated, has been circulated into a water tank to be reheated, aerated, and filtered. This water is then pumped back into the system and reused for continuous treatment of the fish.
Another method of control is biocontrol, and in sea lice we use cleaner fish. Ballan, wrasse, and lumpfish are widely used as they're omnivorous, opportunistic feeders, and they're both proven to be effective salmon delousers, but there has been mixed results. There have also been concerns regarding animal welfare, ethical considerations of using vertebrates, and sustainability, as cleaner fish are largely wild caught. With more evidence-based research, it could increase their effectiveness and address these concerns.
As another method of control, scientists have been developing vaccines for salmon, which will help to protect salmon from sea lice infections. Whilst there are many different types of vaccines that could be developed, researchers in Chile have recently produced 3 vaccine prototypes using the recombinant proteins cathepsin and peritrophin. The proteins have effectiveness in increasing resistance as they help to regulate the interactions between the salmon and sea lice when they're in the early stages of development. The 3 prototypes that the researchers produced were Prototype A, containing peritrophin as the active ingredient, Prototype B, where cathepsin was the active ingredient, and Prototype C, which was a 50-50 mix of both proteins. In experimental trials, they found that Prototype C had the highest efficacy and was effective at reducing sea lice infestations by 52%.
Here's a wee summary of the slide's content. Salmon aquaculture is extremely important, and with an integrated pest management control scheme, has the potential to be a sustainable, environmentally conscious method of providing nutritional food for a burgeoning global population as we run out of terrestrial farming land. And with the control of Elsomonas improving with future research, there's opportunities for continued improvement in salmon aquaculture. Thank you for listening.